All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started so I can keep us on time this morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at the Chamber for the second Coffee with Coop session. We're pleased to welcome our panelists here today. We're covering three different and very important facets of our community this morning, so we're looking forward to hearing that variety of updates and developments from the Otesaga, the Village, and Otsego Electric today. Just one reminder, for the sake of the audio, I have everybody muted, but we do encourage you very much to ask questions of the panelists. They're more than welcome. Feel free to just, in the chat box at the bottom, if you have any questions throughout the presentations, to just write them in there, and then at the end of the session, I'll share them with the panelists to answer. So I'm going to start right off this morning with Marty. Marty is the Chief Operating Officer and General Manager for the Otesaga. He's been in that role for 8 months now. He has a wealth of experience in the hospitality industry, having served as the GM of luxury properties across the U.S., including the Equinox Golf Resort and Spa in Manchester, Vermont, and HEI hotels and resorts such as the Hilton St. Cruz the Hilton St. Charles and Santa Cruz, Astor Crown Plaza, and the Costa Mesa Marriott. He's been very involved in all the communities he's served through board service. And the Otesaga is coming off having been open for the winter this season, and I'm sure they're busily preparing for the upcoming tourism season as well. So thank you for being with us this morning, Marty.
Certainly. Thank you for having me. All right. So good morning, everybody. Do you want me to just jump right in?
Sure, go right ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. This is my first meeting with you all. So it's
yes, welcome.
Nice to see everybody. Certainly have seen some of your names, and nice to put some faces to those names. So, once again, it's been an interesting time joining the community. Obviously, unfortunately, with COVID out there, it just doesn't allow us to get out and about and meet and introduce and as I normally would. So it's nice to meet you all virtually if I haven't seen you already yet. So. I was asked to just talk a little bit about, how we approach the pandemic here, at the Otesaga, and kind of what was some of our thoughts and our processes as we went along into the season. As Tara had mentioned, we were opened up this winter, which was the first time that we've ever been opened up to social guests. In the past, we would open up for special groups, or weddings or meetings and things like that, but never for our transient guests, never for guests that are just saying, hey, I need to get out of Albany for a day or whatever the case may be. And we put that decision in a lot to do with, a couple of factors. One, we looked at the Cooper Inn, and we obviously didn't have the Cooper Inn opened up this year. We did use that space as office spaces for some of our partners that we have down in the city, and so that they can escape and be able to be in a safe environment and not be involved, be in that city environment. The other piece is that, there was so much, and still is, as I'm sure you're all hearing little by little, of the pent-up demand in the hospitality industry, and for people to be able to get out and to travel again. And so being able to open up for transient guests really allowed people in the community just to be able to get out, whether it's with an hour ride or half an hour car ride or a little bit of a staycation. Maybe people from in town, were able to kind of join us over the winter time. So it was an interesting experience, a very good experience for us. I'll get into some of that now a little bit more. I know we've got a certain amount of time. I can get a little long in the tooth at times. So if there's a flag that needs to go up or something to tell me my time is running close. There were a lot of steps that we obviously took into making sure, first and foremost, that our guests were safe and that our staff and our employees were safe. And that was really and truly the underlying phrase that you could say that we had. Will our staff still be safe? Will our guests be safe when they come and join us? And how can we try to reduce any chance at all of helping to spread or taking that possibility? So when COVID first hit us, we closed everything, right? Obviously, with the resort being open, closed everything, meaning all of our amenities were closed. So if you went golfing, you couldn't eat at the grill. Our We weren't checking bags in. We got rid of the valet service at the resort. We closed our spa. We didn't allow our fitness center to be open. Any of these extra items that we had were very, very basic, grassroots, really just rooms and the restroom. We closed our in-room dining, preventing any of our staff from going into a guest room where a guest may be, have spent hours overnight sleeping, and then have a housekeeper walk into the room after the guests have been sleeping there all night. So we restricted some of our services where we would do housekeeping service only after the guests had checked out. We took a 132-room hotel resort and turned it basically into a 70-room resort. And we capped it. We said, this is what we're going to do. We're only going to sell 70 rooms. And the goal was to allow some of the rooms as our guests checked out to be able to aerate themselves for a good 24-hour period. If we can let them go 72 hours, we would even do that before we would actually even have somebody come in and then start to clean and sanitize. So again, everything that we really did was with our mind on safety for our guests and for our associates. We looked at what some of the big companies were doing out there. What was the Marriott Luxury Grand Collection doing? What are the Ritz-Carltons doing? What are the Hiltons doing, right? How are they trying to stay safe? We looked at our state mandates, and what were we being asked of, from our government on what to do. We put all that information together, and then truthfully, we took it a step 2 or 3 above that. We were allowed to, by law, we're allowed to, because it's an essential business, be opened up 100% occupied and sell all of our rooms. But that's just not what we felt was the safe or the right thing to do. And so we continue with that today. A little bit of it has been like, well, Marty, how do we know when to turn things on? When do you advance and take the next steps? And, as we see the success of the program and what we were doing, I liken it to a spigot, right, for water. And so we have this slow little drip coming. And then as we felt safer and felt more comfortable, we'd open the spigot a little bit more to allow more water to flow or allow us to do more business. And so during the course of the year and rolling into the fall and the winter time, we did things like by the end of the golf season last year, for any of you that may be subscribers with us, we opened up our pro shop because we knew we can do it safe. Right? Retail was allowed to be open. We knew what our restrictions were. And then so we opened up, our pro shop so that we can do some retail in there. We opened up the fitness center in the hotel itself so that guests that are here have that amenity to go in there. Again, looking at what all the mandates were, sitting down, meeting, figuring out how we can do it, creating checklists for our housekeeping team so we can get in there and clean. So we opened that up. More recently, we've opened up our spa. And again, if we have 2 treatment rooms, but we only service 1 treatment room at a time. And so when a guest is in one room getting a massage, the other one is basically airing itself out. The guest will leave, and that other room will sanitize that whole room, and then the next massage we do in the other room. So we're actually alternating the rooms, cleaning the rooms, giving them a chance to aerate, and things like that. So we'll continue along that process as we're going into the new season to open up a little bit more on the amenities, and we're in the process of putting this all together. We've got a great document, we call it the Otesaga Care Program. It's actually on our website, so if anybody was interested, you could certainly go onto our website, and it talks about just the different steps in all the different departments. Not in minute detail of exactly what's happening, but just to give a sense and to give an idea for our guests and for anybody to see, well, what is the Otesaga doing to take care of it within all of the, all of the departments, whether it be food and beverage, housekeeping, et cetera. So we use that as a little bit as our roadmap. And as we make changes, as the mandates change, because we certainly all know, just wait 5 minutes and something will change on what we can do or what we can't do. And then we just try to keep that, updated, best we possibly can. A good example of that is, when this was first kind of came out, we were also worried about surfaces, right? Touching surfaces, we're wearing gloves everywhere we're going and doing that. And then we learned that it was a lot more what was happening in the air. And so, we had applied for our PPP loan. And then with that monies, we went out and we bought air sanitizers. So now that we literally have around the resort, these blowers that blow sanitized solution in a sense into the air to catch on to the droplets and help to try to help keep the air safe. Literally went out and bought a backpack. It kind of looks like Ghostbusters, if you remember that movie. It's Ghostbusters with a gun on it. And we have our housekeeping team walk through the hallways and just spray the air in the hallways that we know that we have guest rooms at. So, you start in one way, but then as we continue to learn and as we continue to develop and find out what's out there in the community and the best practices, we're doing the best we can to stay proactive and apply that here at the resort. I think we've been very successful at that. We've seen a lot of people with a lot of humbling comments to us on how safe they feel when they join us, whether it be for our local clientele that join us for 1909 night on a Friday or International night on a Wednesday, how we've created the winter garden outside so that we do have a bit of outdoor dining and it's a safe environment, how we spaced out the tables, how we have the air sanitizer in there. So we just continue to walk along that path. So getting a little long-winded, I can give you a billion different examples, but I think that's just a little clip of some of the things that that we've done as we headed into the pandemic and tried to figure out what are we going to do. And then as we go along and feel more and more secure without ever, I'll say it 1,000 times over, without ever forgetting our number one priority is to take care of our guests and our associates and to make sure that everybody is safe. And so that's kind of been a little bit of our mantra. I did put up, so that's just about the resort. I'll take try to grab the screen here, and Shiva helped me in putting some slides together. I see him on the display, so I want to make sure I give him his due props for assisting putting some of this together. And so I figured I'd just talk just a moment or two about some of the trends that we saw through 2020 and going into 2021. With COVID. An interesting thing that we saw, as you can see, and this is very big, is the booking window. As you can see, from 1 to 30 days, we had 76% of all of our bookings came in less than a month's time. Very, very different from what we've seen and what we're used to doing in the past. Only 3% is 91 plus days. And as you can see, in the past couple of years, it's been around 30. So we're about a 30-30-30, right? If you really want to look at it, 30 days out, 30 to 90, and then 90 plus, it's about 30%, 30%, 30%. And it jumped all the way up to 76%. And again, that's with consumer confidence and the ability of feeling of being able to travel. But it makes it very difficult to plan, right? All of a sudden, 2 days in, you're booking 10 rooms, 15 rooms, staffing levels and supplies and things like that. So that certainly posed its challenge, but also caused us just to relax a little bit, that it was kind of happening. Our mix definitely changed. We also talked a little bit earlier about our social and our transient guests. Again, as you can see, for 2020, we had 87% of our guests with a our group decreased, where we've been about a 60-40 split from group side to social. Now it's really been more of that social guest that has joined us. They certainly dominated in 2020. We're seeing the same thing occur, though as some restrictions are being lifted, as I'm sure that you've heard, capacities are being able to be a little larger. Actually, just yesterday, another mandate changed with the government as far as times and what time we're allowed to stay open till for restaurants and for groups. We're starting to see groups start to come back, be more interested, starting to say, yes, we're definitely going to go, rather than, I'm not sure if I'm going to come. And we're really seeing that a lot more towards the July, August, and heading into the fall, though we do see some of that in June. So that's about that. First-time guests increased in 2020 as well. Tremendous amount, but certainly a good 6% more folks were first-time guests visiting us than repeat guests. The age that we found of our guests was a slightly little younger age group. I think a lot of that, again, has to be, who was the population, or what was the population that was in most jeopardy, or is in most jeopardy with COVID. So understandably, that the elder group, the travel was a little less from them, but we see a larger increase of 29% as the 56 to 65. And then also the 26 to 35, jumped up to 10%. So we saw a little bit of difference in the age and our demographics. And then the markets as well, is where did the people come from, right? Again, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that radius of where our guests from certainly did shrink in this time, again, with a lot of flight restrictions and the consumer confidence and things like that. So we saw a lot more, 65% of our guests through September came from New York State. But this was an interesting slide showing you the percentage increase on where some of our guests came from. And again, as we talk about that local New York market and the circumference from where they traveled from, Binghamton, we increased over 300%, Buffalo over 112%, Utica 71%, Rochester 43%. And then again, those drive markets that we historically had seen, well, not that necessarily Chicago's a drive market, but the Boston, Philadelphia, areas, certainly we saw a decrease on that. So some of the other trends, and some of the things, some of them that I've talked about already, we continue to see that our lead time is short, that the booking windows are very short. Again, kind of giving us the don't panic, just hold the course, and they're booking literally a week out, 2 weeks out. We'll look at a room and, a day we'll have 12 rooms booked, and then in a week's time, that's up to 50, 60 rooms booked. The week before, that weekend. Weekends certainly is still the busiest time because it's predominantly transit and social guests and not midweek guests, which are tend to be a little bit more of our business, of business guests rather. Repeat guests accounted for 25% of all visits, and we're seeing that now. So again, our repeat guests that's kind of starting to trend up some. Over the winter, again, we didn't know really what to expect, having never been opened in the winter before. The visits were shorter, right? So we averaged about a 1.6 length of stay as compared to 2.1 in the summertime. And then as we just finished up Q1, we saw that, Albany is consistently the second top market. Each month that we're going, Albany is the top two, every month as far as a market who's coming to the area. So those are some of the trends that we've seen. So. All right. I've taken, I think, a little bit more time than allotted here. So, I'll kind of, wrap that up again. We'll continue with that spigot analogy. We are opening up more things. We're starting to do some facials now in the spa. That'll start in May. We're opening up our tennis courts coming up soon. We've increased from saying 70 rooms is our cap to now 90 rooms is our cap. So we're starting to little by little open up, some things step by step is our process, and we'll continue to do that. That's kind of the 3,000-foot view Reader's Digest version of kind of what's going on at the Otesaga. So I appreciate your support and the time, and thanks for having me chat.
Thanks so much, Marty. I know the community really appreciates all of the safety efforts that the Otesaga has taken on, and certainly hearing those insights. So thank you for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Right, next up is Cooperstown Mayor Ellen Tillapaugh. She's been mayor since 2018. There's been a lot happening in the village in recent years, and in the recent years and months that she's been at the helm, especially in regards to infrastructure projects, as I'm sure everyone's aware, including the work done on Pioneer Street and Pioneer Park, the Doubleday Field renovation, these transformative projects have been very exciting to see take shape and come to fruition. So we certainly welcome Ellen here today for an update on village projects and happenings, both in the past year and in the coming future as well.
Thank you, Tara. Let me share my screen because I also sort of have a PowerPoint here. Oops, went too far. There we go. Yes, so I'm going to, Tara had asked sort of how the village responded to the pandemic. It was a significant economic impact to the village. And I'm going to run through sort of our approach last spring when at the onset and give you a little bit of background on the village. So let's start with some of the, might be boring dates and things for some people, but a lot of people don't know that that a village government, our fiscal year is not a calendar year. It's June 1st through May 31st. And our budgeting is set by New York State law. So by March 20th, we have to submit, the mayor has to submit a tentative budget for the next fiscal year. We have to have a public hearing on that by April 15th, and by May 1st, 1 month prior to that June 1st deadline, we have to have an adopted budget. So I submitted my March 20th, 2020 budget, and on that day, Governor Cuomo signed the executive order putting us on pause. So we instantly knew that budget we had submitted would be greatly revised. We, shortly after that, we learned no induction weekend, no Dreams Park, no Glimmerglass Opera, etc. And we would be having to implement, safety measures, etc. So in last year's, well, I say last year's, we created it last year. We're still in that 2020-21 budget. It will end on May 31st. We had to cut nearly $800,000 in revenue. We knew we were going to lose it, and we did. The major one was paid parking. In a routine year, we generate $470,000 in paid parking. We budgeted that we would get 110, and that's exactly about what we got. So right there, we had, a significant, almost a $380,000 loss in that one alone. We weren't able to rent Doubleday Field at all. All that revenue was lost. We get just 1% of sales tax. That went down. We lost there. None of our parks could open, etc. So significant. That March 20th deadline is already hit. We've actually already had our public hearing on our 2021-22 budget. And by the end of this month, we'll make some little tweaks to that, but that budget is now ready to go. So I'm showing you, all this is on the village website, all minutes, etc. So our tentative budget for this coming year is already up there. Key one is this general fund. We have designated funds for water, sewer, etc. But this is really the operations of the village. And it's about a $3.4 million budget. Key to remember is that not quite, about half of that comes from our tax levy. And that $1,779,194 figure, and I can recite that in my sleep, has not changed for 8 years. The village, the present boards, my predecessors, made a very firm commitment not to be increasing the tax levy, because that's how we can help our businesses and our residents the most. And that equates to a $5.19, almost 20 cent tax rate per 1,000. And check out Oneonta, check out surrounding municipalities, and you'll find they tend to be a lot higher than that. We're very fiscally conservative. So our goals, I need to move you guys there. Our goals at the start of the pandemic were to maintain staffing. We don't have that big a workforce, about 19 full-time and about 7 or 8 part-time employees in the village. And I'm sure we all know the Otsego County cut and furloughed 60 positions. We felt that there was going to be enough economic damage to our region without, eliminating valued employees. So even when the state said you've got to reduce your capacity in your workplace by 50%, some of us could sort of immediately jump to Zoom and still keep the village running. We're an essential business, but obviously a streets crew, there's not much they can do via Zoom. we kept everybody on, even though we alternated, so that if there should be one problem with one of our employees at the water plant, the other employee was safe, we could decontaminate and still keep our vital infrastructure running. That was critical to the village. Safety of our residents was very important. We began right after masks were recognized as an important tool in fighting the spread of the pandemic. We instituted masks on Main. And then by summertime, we had instituted the first mask law in Otsego County. This slide that's up, I snapped from one of the daily briefings. This was actually in early November. And you can see that Cooperstown was quite successful in keeping our infection rate low. But we also really wanted to support our local businesses. And so in conjunction with the chamber, we developed, the shop local. And village paid for a banner, which we put across Main Street that had the chamber's shop local logo on it, encouraging everyone to, stay safe, but also how critical it was to maintain our local businesses on Main Street that were really feeling an impact of the pandemic. We also instituted Cooperstown Outdoors that allowed not just our sidewalks, our public sidewalks, to be used by restaurants for their food sale, but also merchants could put material vend out there. That has never really happened in the past, but we recognized these merchants really needed to be outdoors in order to safely continue some of their operations. We created Free Fridays. We did have paid parking in Doubleday Lot, but every Friday it was totally free. And we encouraged businesses to stay open till 8 p.m. Worked well with the chamber on this. They coordinated our Music on Main in Pioneer Park. So there'd be music and just trying to keep the community going and support as much as we could. But I think what's key to remember is that, that's tourism. Everyone thinks, oh, that's 90% of Cooperstown. It isn't. Our major employer, of course, in the village of Cooperstown is Bassett Healthcare. And we have to recognize that the village has a lot of infrastructure. And unfortunately, some of that infrastructure just hadn't been kept up over the years. Our initial wastewater treatment plant in the village of Cooperstown was constructed in 1967. It had a designated lifespan of 25 years. Didn't quite get us to today. So we have secured over $5 million in grants and funding for what is an $8.6 million wastewater treatment plant upgrade. The balance of that is with 0% financing through the Environmental Facilities Corp. All these projects had really begun before the pandemic and continued right through. Again, it was an essential infrastructure that was allowed to continue. We did have, some days when we reduced workers on site, but we have been continuing with that. Due to the pandemic, there have been a couple of delays. We hope to have this finished in December 2020, but we will be finishing more towards the summertime now. And as Tara mentioned, we received a federal highway administration grant administered through New York State DOT for major investment in our downtown. This primarily covered a lot of the sidewalks, crosswalks, street lamps. We installed 2 blocks of our vintage street lamps on Pioneer Street. Of course, it upgraded our stoplight, etc. And this project was over the course of several years, but really has given us a vastly improved look to our downtown. I think it's important to recognize that the village has invested over $10 million into our downtown in the past decade. Some of the infrastructure elements included solar-powered trash receptacles that look uniform street furniture, improved wayfinding signage, all our signage, and On the reverse side, you can see that we list businesses on all this signage. On the reverse side, this happens to be the Doubleday Field sign. It's the history of Doubleday. So these signs provide both historical information, but also a resource to our tourists. That is, and the TEP also funded two sets of banner poles on our Main Street. Previously, if someone wanted to put a banner up on Main Street, they had to work with property owners because the banners were tied to their buildings across Main Street. It wasn't always very conducive. Now we have two dedicated banners, pole sets that will allow us to display banners for businesses and organizations. And of course, everyone's quite familiar with our $5.8 million rehabilitation and upgrade of historic Doubleday Field. A lot of people are surprised. Sometimes they think, oh, doesn't the hall own the Doubleday Field? Nope, it's a village, has been in the village hands for a century now. And it's you know, a very important feature of obviously our Main Street and Cooperstown. And it had, again, needed serious upgrades. If you recall before, a year and a half ago, you went to Doubleday, this is what you saw. You kind of looked up a road, and the grandstand was our 1939 historic National Register grandstand, was sort of hidden behind parked vehicles. It was not pedestrian friendly at all. There was always a worry about accidents there. And of course, the whole redesign incorporated an archway. Let's let people know that you're approaching Doubleday Field. Let's have pedestrian safe entranceway for them. And personally for me, it was the relocation of the Sandlot Kid to a place of honor in front of our historic grandstand. So previously it'd been sort of hidden. It almost looked like it belonged to Key Bank and not the village of Cooperstown. So these components, the parking lot redesign, the pedestrian safe entryway, there was $500,000 put into stabilizing elements and repairing elements in the 1939 grandstand, which brings us to our final phase. We have gone to bid, and the board accepted the low bids at our March meeting for the final phase, which is the third base grandstand and building. So this is to give you an architect's rendition of what it will look like. It will provide ADA compliant seating. We really don't truly have that in Doubleday right now. That will have close to 22 bathrooms in it, because that is so important for our tourists. They're always like, where do you go? And there aren't many public bathrooms. Again, this is all infrastructure that the village of Cooperstown provides for our economy. And this is the ultimate appearance of that third base building. To a degree, we've instituted some of the elements of the 39 grandstand, the ironwork, etc., but on a much smaller scale, so we'll never detract from that feature. We also have put quite a bit of money into the village's historic 1896 Village Hall, which also hosts our Cooperstown Art Association and the Village Library. Just recently, we installed a new fire escape. We're in the process of upgrading the lift. There's skylights in the ballroom area of this that have not been functioning for probably 70 years, 80 years. And we secured a grant to repair and utilize those skylights, which are also a ventilation system. And so this will tie into you a little bit, Tim. We also, working with Otsego now, have about $310,000 in funding. 60 of that will come from a grant that the village secured for a Main Street Wi-Fi project, which will have Wi-Fi units, and that's a little picture of one of the Wi-Fi units, and we were just testing it out. That unit will be attached to all our lampposts, our historic lampposts, up toward the top, toward the decorative elements there. And it will provide high-speed Wi-Fi for tourists, Main Street businesses. It's really connecting to the broadband. It's also creating an app which can be utilized for information for visitors and for securing data. And that is sort of the summary of the village's activity. There are more, trust me. We have grants for improving culverts. We did get certified as a clean community, which gives us access to additional grants and funding. And we also have secured funding for, not very exciting, but a new salt storage. We currently share our salt storage with the county, and we need to, in the future, secure our own so that we're not commingling supplies and reliant on them. I should say that I'm very proud of my village board and the commitment to our community. We're sort of like the peculiar person. We're the goose who lays the golden egg, but very little of that egg is ultimately shared, shall I say, with the village of Cooperstown. I will point out that we're a generator of bed tax. The county has never, ever, ever shared a penny of that bed tax revenue with the village. And you've seen in the papers recently information on the American Recovery Plan. The county is fortunate to get 11 million, which will kind of make them whole. Oneonta to our south is receiving several million, which will help them immensely. We've had significant losses. We are looking at the most at about $250,000 from that American Recovery Plan. It's just the way it's set up. We're a village. It's got to feed through the state, to the township, and then back to the village. So I am, as much as we have enjoyed not being able to raise taxes, unfortunately, we're going to probably have to begin raising taxes in the next few budgets because we are not getting the financial support from federal, state, and local that we really should. There you go.
Thanks so much, Ellen. It's very cool to see that third base rendering. That's exciting. And we thank you so much for providing that summary of all those projects and the village's work to continually improve the downtown as well. And I love when there's a seamless transition from presenter to presenter in talking about broadband. Our next presenter is Tim Johnson. He's the CEO of Otsego Electric Cooperative. OEC's purpose is to provide cost-competitive, safe, and reliable energy and broadband solutions while working to improve the quality of life for their members. There's been a lot of exciting news on the broadband front recently. I know that Tim will speak to that, so I won't give a summary of that. He'll just go into that. But certainly we're excited to see the expanding broadband infrastructure be expanded into some underserved areas here locally. So thanks so much for joining us, Tim.
Thank you, Tara. Thanks everybody for joining. I will not be doing slides. If anybody wants any future information, we can provide it to you, but I thought it might be easier to be conversational today and give you the opportunity, if you have questions, to please ask them. I've done a boatload of presentations recently on Zoom, and they've all been kind of one-sided, presenter only, and I prefer to answer questions and give you information that's pertinent directly to you. There's some really exciting, as Tara said, there's some very exciting stuff going on here in Hartwick. Hartwick is, we jokingly say over here, we're the bustling suburb of Cooperstown, right? Lots of folks from around the country. I'm actually testifying on Tuesday before a House committee, agricultural committee on broadband. And whenever people ask where you're from, I always have to refer to Cooperstown because everybody knows Cooperstown, and we appreciate everything that the village and the Hall of Fame, the Otesaga, and all of the other institutions in the Cooperstown village and adjoining communities provide for us. We feel that a rising tide floats all boats, which is why we ended up getting in the broadband business. We're traditionally just an electric business. I shouldn't say just, but because that's as we all know, an essential utility. We've been doing that over here at Otsego for about 80 years now, 75 to 80 years. We started in 1941. We serve about 4,900 meter locations in the county and in slight parts of other adjoining counties, but mostly Otsego. And let me just tell you a little bit about how I ended up here. I'm a local guy. For those of you who don't know me, I born at Bassett, raised in Edmiston. I'm a small town country lawyer, practiced in Edmiston and Morris for about 25 years. And during that time, I represented Otsego Electric as outside counsel for almost 25 years. Back in 2012, I decided to leave private practice, went to work for the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association in Virginia. And the reason why I bring this up is that's when it really came home to me, the difference between what's happening in Northern Virginia. It's kind of the center place of internet connectivity in our nation, perhaps in the world. And I was able to have FiOS in an apartment that I rented there. And the competitors' service at home, I had, they were both provided by Verizon, as we know. I had DSL at home that ran at about 3 megabits per second, extremely slow. I always had circles on my screen, from the blue circles of death, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Drive you insane when you're trying to download or upload. You're sitting there, you might as well go have a snack, come back, check again, still happening. So it really came home to me. I telecommuted back and forth, and occasionally I do webinars, similar to Zoom. I do back then, and they were, I forget the company, but they were black and white pretty much. I mean, the quality from my household was terrible. And we used to have to schedule those in the middle of the day at noon, because we knew the kids who gamed and used a lot of the network connectivity and pipe were not there online, because you could see by 2, 3 o'clock, boom, everything dropped off. So it started to seed into my mind that we need to do something up here about broadband. And what happened is, after about 3 years in Northern Virginia, my roots were back here. I decided to come back, go back into private practice, and the opportunity at Otsego Electric to be the CEO opened up in 2016. So I've been the CEO since then. Pretty much my board of directors gave me job one to be, to develop and look for grant money to start a broadband business. We didn't know how we were going to do it. We'd already been doing satellite internet. It was slow. It was, well, I shouldn't say slow. It was pretty fast, actually, for the time. You had speeds up to 10 megabits per second, but you could see the writing on the wall that so many video options, so much internet connection was being driven by video, marketing, how-to videos, YouTube. How many of us have gone to YouTube just to see, how do I do this in my house? How do I fix my faucet? How do I do this or that? This has been the go-to method of getting information. So we embarked on I started going to meetings, started looking through all available channels, located a gentleman in the Washington, D.C. area who's familiar with working with rural electric cooperatives on this issue. New York had started their New York broadband program. We applied in fall of 2016 for seed money to get started. We got $4 million. And that really allowed us to build a backbone, kind of a crisscross of the county for fiber. And then subsequently, another stage of grant funding was made available by New York. In 2017, we received $10 million more, and that allowed us to fill in many more locations, build a ring, so to speak, a fiber ring to provide the service to many of the communities that we serve, and to provide service to 100% of our members. That goal has been achieved. We made it to 100% of our members last year, early last year actually, and we also received grant funding to help some of our neighbors. So we've built between 100 and 125 miles off system, so to speak, outside of our electric footprint, which is unprecedented here at Otsego. We traditionally have only provided service to our members directly, but now we're in this new world where we provide services to non-members as well. And of course, you can imagine those neighbors that we've been able to get to have been ecstatic. The service levels that we provide are beyond what I received in Northern Virginia now. So we've already exceeded other commercially available alternatives. We offer up to a 1 gigabit per second speed service, which is, I believe it's the fastest in the county. There may be a couple locations in the county where you can match that, but I can do that at on my desk in my office in my house out in Edmiston, which is a mile outside of the village. So that connectivity has been offered to over 5,000 locations that we've passed. We've already connected 2,700. We continued in full operation throughout the pandemic, in spite of the challenges that presented for us in doing installs, because that required our installers to actually go into each person's house, set up a router, connect it, show people how to access it, show them set up a password, etc., and explain how to connect other devices like their smartphones, their TVs, etc. Explain some streaming. So we did that at extreme personal risk, and I applaud my employees who were able to do that and willing to do that. And we used some contractors as well. And the need was so extreme that we felt we had no choice but to go ahead and try to do it in any way that we could. Of course, everybody was masked in gloves. Actually, we had them use gloves, washed hands, asked household members to stay back at least 10 feet while they're working. And we connected over 1,000 people last year. So we're very proud of that. We feel like that is why we are here. And that is why now we have over 2,700, almost 2,800 locations that we serve. We continue to get requests for more every day, and we're doing what we can to get to them. We applied for more grant funding last fall, and we received about $7 million in additional federal funding from a reverse auction. So we will be building out another 100 miles. And the good news is, for those folks in those locations, this is all map specific. Unfortunately, they didn't just give us $7 million and say, go do what you think you can do with it, Mr. Johnson. They said, here's where you have to go. And those locations that aren't included, we're sorry. You aren't getting any money for them. So that's been a difficult conversation to have with folks who call us and are outside of these mapped locations. We hope there's talk of more money being made available through the Biden administration if Congress adopts it. He has proposed, I believe, either 80 or 100 billion. I haven't seen the exact figures yet. It may be 100 billion that they're loosely tossing around. I'm not sure how they want to deploy that, but we'll be watching that closely, and we'll be applying for funding if it's available on reasonable terms and serves these actual locations. One of the big problems, of course, has been identifying locations. So they're working on that problem at the FCC. It's part of what I'll be testifying about on Tuesday. And I think realistically, there will be money available because we know there are gaps. There's still gaps. The New York State broadband program offered about $80 million to, I probably shouldn't say 80, but a boatload of money to satellite services to provide service to some of these locations in the county. And obviously satellite service is rapidly becoming inadequate. There are problems with latency. There are problems with leaves. Funny how we have trees with leaves out here in Otsego County, and in the growing season, when you might need service. Occasionally, if you have a tree interfering with your dish, you do not get service. Or if you have a heavy rainstorm, you don't get service. So these are the problems with satellite, and that's why we believe a fiber to the home project like Otsego Electric's is the most resilient and expandable way to solve and address this problem. I see somebody just asked if service might become available in the village of Cooperstown. Someday, maybe. Right now, our focus is in the rural areas. That's where we're getting our funding. The hamlets and the villages, we've had a lot of requests from people to come into villages and hamlets. As you can tell, like in the village of Cooperstown, it'd be extremely costly to get to some locations. If you look at the poles, there's an awful lot of equipment and copper, old copper attached to those poles. So there's very little room for additional attachments. So the village of Cooperstown, probably not in the near future for sure. Medium term, I'm not sure at all. Long term, that's a possibility. But that's kind of a really rapid overview. That's Otsego Electric has now, we've done all this without adding a lot of people, which is amazing. We have a really qualified staff here. We've added two fiber techs for outside maintenance work, which is good for the local economy, and we appreciate that very much. And we also have added one network administrator internally. So to think of it in those terms, I'm very proud of the fact that we've been able to kind of add this essential business to our business model without having to greatly increase our employment. And it allows us to keep costs low. Our minimum service level is about $49.95, which we feel is extremely reasonable compared to the alternatives. But that's it. Is there another chat question, Tara? I didn't see.
There is one more. Yep. It's is the service sustainable once installed without grant funds?
Yes, it is right now. New York State wants us to, certain internet broadband providers are being asked to make service available at a $15 a month level. We feel that is less than our operating costs because of our lack of density. Because we serve areas, we have about 5 customers per mile out in our system area, whereas in the village of Cooperstown, of course, you have 900 probably within a mile. So we don't have density to offset the cost of providing service to low density areas. And we feel, unfortunately, the state agreed that the small providers under 20,000 subscribers are exempt from that. We, however, do everything we can to keep pricing as fair as we can. Is there another question?
There's one more. Do you have to pay town franchise fees like other providers?
We already had our franchises from our electric cooperative business. We also pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in real property taxes. So yeah, we are treated the same as everybody else. We are, although we're a 501c12, which means we're federally tax exempt, income tax exempt, corporate tax exempt, we are not exempt from real property tax, and we pay a substantial amount of property tax. It's a good question. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Tim. It's certainly, I can imagine that the demand during the pandemic must have been astronomical. That extension is exciting news for our, quality of life, obviously, and for our economy here in Otsego County. So thank you so much.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. I'll just, in case anybody else has questions, I'll just do a quick overview of the next session, and feel free to chime in with any other questions you may have. The next session is next Thursday, the 22nd. We're going to be welcoming Dr. Tommy Ibrahim, who's the president and CEO of Bassett Healthcare. He'll be talking about the One Bassett vision during that session. So if anybody has questions for the panelists that they think of after the fact, feel free to pass them along to the chamber and we'll get them to the panelists to answer. And we just want to thank the panel again so much for their time this morning and thank you all for attending.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
organizing it, Tara.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.